To the people of France and the world, Hugo was more than a writer or a senator. He was a moral compass, a hero whose work reminded humanity what it means to seek justice. Welcome to Icons of History, where we dive deep into the past to uncover the stories of the individuals who shaped our world. From great leaders to visionaries who changed the course of humanity, here we bring you the tales of the icons who left an indelible mark on the pages of history. Victor Hugo is a name that echoes down the corridors of literary history, his work towering as a monument to human resilience, moral awakening, and the fight for justice. He was not merely a writer, he was a visionary, a prophet of progress whose pen became the sword in battles for freedom and equality. Today, schools, libraries, and hearts across the globe carry his legacy. But his journey was far from easy. It was a winding path filled with tumult, passion, and triumphs that still reverberate. This is the story of Hugo's life, work, and the legacy that continues to remind us of the power of words to reshape our world. Victor Hugo was born on February 26, 1802, in Besançon, France, into the chaos of post-revolutionary France, where ideals clashed with stark realities. His father, Léopold Sigisbert Hugo, was a general in Napoleon's army, while his mother, Sophie Trebuchet, was deeply royalist. This dichotomy planted seeds of contradiction and complexity in Hugo's worldview. Ideas of loyalty, rebellion, and justice that would later emerge in his most famous works. As a boy, Hugo's gifts were visible. He was precocious and driven, declaring at just 14 years old that he wanted to be Chateaubriand or nothing. Unlike many children of the Romantic era, however, he didn't just dream. He worked tirelessly. He immersed himself in literature, devoured philosophy, and honed his writing skills. By the time he was 20, Hugo had published his first book of poetry, Odes et Poésies diverses, earning accolades and catching the attention of King Louis XVIII himself, who awarded him a royal pension. For Hugo, it seemed that destiny had cracked open its doors. But through those doors came not only triumph, but also turbulence. During the early years of his career, Hugo's personal life became a storm of emotional highs and lows. He married Adèle Fouché, a childhood sweetheart, in 1822. Yet even in his domestic life, contradictions pressed against him. While Hugo loved Adèle, his own infidelity and Adèle's emotional distance shadowed their relationship, creating turmoil that often found its way into his work. Hugo was a romanticist in the truest sense of the word. His early literary works, including poems such as Les Orientales, celebrated nature, human emotion, and the sublime beauty hidden within existence. He found glory in the ideal and examined the elevated heights to which art could take humanity. But Hugo was never content with staying abstract. His style evolved, and his focus shifted to the concrete struggles of people living on the margins of society. He chose to look beyond art for art's sake and instead crafted literature that would become a mirror reflecting societal flaws. Notre-Dame de Paris, or The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, published in 1831, was one such reflection. This novel, set in the medieval period, condemned the tragic consequences of prejudice, injustice, and authoritarianism. Through characters like Quasimodo, the deformed bell ringer who yearns for acceptance, and Esmeralda, the intoxicating gypsy dancer doomed by her beauty, Hugo unveiled the cruelty that power and ignorance can inflict. At the same time, he celebrated Paris as a vibrant labyrinth of human complexity and elevated Gothic architecture as a metaphor for resilience in history. Yet, Hugo's career had only begun to push boundaries. Following Notre-Dame de Paris, Hugo leaned into his political passions, becoming increasingly outspoken about injustice. As turmoil swept France, Hugo found himself vacillating from royalist to staunch Republican, evolving alongside the tides of history. His speeches and writings exposed inequalities, challenged oppressors, and underscored the suffering of the underprivileged. His ideals, his voice, both in literature and politics, became ever louder. And when revolution came knocking, Hugo did not retreat but stood at the forefront. However, revolution came at a price. When Napoleon III seized power in 1851, Hugo, resolute in his opposition to tyranny, was exiled from France. It was a blow both devastating and galvanizing. Stripped from his homeland, Hugo took refuge first in Belgium, then in Britain's Channel Islands, where he spent nearly 2 decades writing fiercely in solitude, his pen wielded against violence and oppression. These years of exile turned out to be some of the most productive of Hugo's life, as the isolation sharpened his resolve. During this time, Hugo wrote what would become his magnum opus, Les Misérables. Published in 1862, this novel was a sweeping, panoramic depiction of France, from its underbelly of poverty to its heights of revolutionary fervor. In Jean Valjean, the ex-convict who strives to regain dignity, and Inspector Javert, the unwavering enforcer of the law, Hugo explored forgiveness and rigidity, human flaws, and societal failures. The novel's themes of redemption, justice, and humanity pierced hearts not just in France but globally. Les Misérables climbed into popular consciousness, even reaching audiences today in the form of translations, films, and stage adaptations that continue to captivate millions. Victor Hugo returned from political exile in 1870 following the fall of Napoleon III, hailed as a hero of liberty and justice. By now, Hugo was not merely a writer or political activist. He was a folk idol, a cultural titan whose voice had transcended boundaries of class and geography. Upon his return, Hugo became a senator and poured himself into advocating for policies to help the downtrodden, universal education, the abolition of the death penalty, and measures for economic equality. Though his activism earned him admirers, it also provoked enemies. There were those who dismissed Hugo's visions of reform as fantastical. Nonetheless, his determination never flagged. In his personal life, Hugo continued to face anguish. Adele had suffered greatly from mental illness, and Hugo's lovers had come and gone, leaving emotional wounds in their wake. But perhaps the greatest heartbreak Hugo endured was the death of his daughter Leopoldine in 1843. She drowned at the age of 19, just months after her marriage. The tragedy devastated Hugo. He wrote hauntingly of Leopoldine's death in poems like Tomorrow at Dawn, verses etched with tender sorrow and an unforgettable stillness. Grief stayed with Hugo for the rest of his life. Yet despite the heartbreak, he transformed his pain into art. The final chapter of Hugo's life was no less significant than those that came before. He continued writing, delving into poetry, theater, essays, and novels. But his stature as a symbol of human hope stood as tall as his written words. Victor Hugo passed away on May 22, 1885, at the age of 83. His death sparked an unprecedented wave of mourning in France. Nearly 2 million people came to honor his memory in a funeral procession that culminated in his burial in the Pantheon. To the people of France and the world, Hugo was more than a writer or a senator. He was a moral compass, a hero whose work reminded humanity what it means to seek justice. Looking back, the legacy of Victor Hugo is one of resilience and ambition, of art that dares to dream in the face of despair. His works endure today, not merely as historical artifacts, but as vital, living texts that continue to speak to the present moment. More than anything, Hugo believed in humanity. Even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise, he wrote in Les Misérables, a sentiment that encapsulates Hugo's unyielding faith in progress. From the cobblestone streets of Paris to the distant shores of exile, from the darkest grief to grand celebrations of hope, Hugo's life itself was poetry. His story continues, etched into hearts and minds, his legacy lighting fires in the lives of those who dare to fight for a better world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time with icons of history. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. See you next time as we explore more icons who made history.